The lights were still on when I stepped inside the London dungeon after closing. They were never on at night. I stood just inside the entrance with my keys in my hand, looking down a corridor that should have been dark. I worked nights as a cleaner at the London dungeon. I had this job for 8 years. By now, it was routine. I came in after closing, did my route, and left before morning. Most nights passed the same way. I knew the building well. I knew how it sounded once the doors closed. I knew how the air shifted when the crowds left. I knew which corridors carried echoes and which ones swallowed them. That night felt wrong the moment I stepped inside. The lights stayed on. They were sensor activated. You walked forward, the lights came up. You moved on, they shut off behind you. That night, they stayed lit. I walked deeper inside, past the ticket area, past the first turn, and the lights stayed bright behind me. I stopped and looked back. Light filled every corridor. I checked my watch. 12 minutes after 11. I stood there longer than I usually would, listening to the ventilation hum, waiting for the system to reset itself. It didn't. I told myself a sensor had failed. The place sat on centuries of brick and damp. Things went wrong. I carried on. I took the service stairs down to the first level and started my route. The lower levels always felt heavier. The ceilings pressed closer. Brick and iron closed in from every side. The air smelled of damp stone, metal pipes, and old water. Phone signal never reached that far down. My radio usually faded after the first stairwell. That night, it gave me static immediately. I reached the plague corridor first. During the day, it was loud and chaotic, packed with movement and noise. Actors clustered together, leaning into one another as they passed. Recorded coughing echoed constantly through the space, looping without pause. Flies buzzed through hidden speakers, their sound filling the space. Carts sat along the walls, loaded with mannequins shaped like bodies, piled and unfinished. At night, the corridor stayed still. I stepped down into it. The lights stayed on, all of them, bright enough to show every detail. That bothered me more than darkness would have. I started cleaning. Sweep first, then mop. Same pattern I had followed for years. Routine kept my head straight. Halfway down, one of the carts sat at an angle. I stopped. That cart weighed enough that any movement left marks on the floor. The stone stayed clean. I crouched slightly and looked closer. No scrape lines, no drag marks. I nudged the cart wheel with my shoe. It rolled easily. I pushed the cart back until it touched the wall and listened. The corridor was quiet. I went on. That's when I saw her. A woman, standing upright. She was standing at the far end of the corridor, bare feet on the stone floor. A thin dress matching the plague costumes. Her head tilted forward. Hair covered her face. I stopped walking. I knew every mannequin in that section. She didn't belong there. My first thought was that someone had played a joke, a staff member, a contractor. Then I noticed her feet. They were wet, dark beneath the toes. I felt my pulse pick up. I became aware of my breathing. "Hello?" I said. My voice sounded wrong in that corridor, flat. She didn't react. I took a step closer. She didn't move. The overhead lights flickered once, then cut out for a fraction of a second. When they came back on, the end of the corridor was empty. The floor stayed dry. Behind me, the cart sat perfectly aligned against the wall. I stood there, trying to work out how fast someone would have to move to leave no sound in that space. I stopped cleaning. I still believed it was a joke, a contractor mistake, or one of my co-workers trying to be funny. Standing there wasn't helping. The job still had to be done. I left that section unfinished and carried on with the rest of the job. I headed for the execution chamber. I kept my pace steady. The corridors felt different under my feet now. The execution section sat deeper than the plague corridor. Fewer turns, thicker walls. More iron worked into the structure. I unlocked the gate and stepped inside. The lights were already on. I closed the gate behind me and latched it. Then the rope creaked, a dry sound, fibers shifting under tension. I froze and looked up. The axe was lowering, slow and controlled. The blade stopped inches above the block. It hung there, perfectly still. I could hear my own breathing now. I looked down and saw footprints on the wet stone floor, bare feet, small, several sets. They crossed the room in loose paths, overlapping, turning slightly where the stone dipped. They ended directly beneath the blade. I unlocked the gate and stepped out of the chamber. I left the bucket and mop where they were. I had to get out. The lights went out. Every light. All at once. The corridor dropped into darkness so complete that I couldn't tell where the walls ended. I heard footsteps below. Slow. Even. The emergency lights flickered on. I saw her again, the same woman from the plague corridor. When the lights came back, the stairwell was empty. I didn't wait. I took the stairs 2 at a time until I reached the door at the top. I opened it and stepped through. Cold air hit my face, and I kept walking until I couldn't see the building anymore. Eventually, I stopped and checked the time. 12 minutes after midnight. I never went back.